Cool. Hi, everyone. As Andrew said, my name is Andrea. I work on the Amazon Alexa team. I used to be based in London, and now I'm based in Milan. And what I usually do is work with developers, but I think voice has a very important design aspect to it, and that's why when I was given the opportunity to come to speak at UX Live, I took it in a heartbeat. So let's get started. I'm going to whiz through some of the intro stuff. The reason I'm going to show you some of the intro stuff is because we have kind of changed our vision relatively recently. We changed our team structure relatively recently, and by giving you the intro stuff, you'll understand where we're heading with Alexa, and therefore the design implications of where we're heading with Alexa. Very intro slide. As you can see, it's also on my shirt. This is the first time ever I've done a talk that has this shirt and that slide together. So you have a spoiler here, but don't look. When I joined the Alexa team, I thought of this image mainly because the way that I always interpreted this image wasn't from a physical standpoint. It wasn't the fact that we were crouching on a computer. It was more about the fact that over time, technology that we use has gotten more and more complex at the end of the day. Especially when it came to the first pieces of software that came out, the command line. There was so much disconnection between what a user wanted to do and how to do it, right? And getting it done. There was a huge gap. Now, things got a little bit better with mobile, because with mobile, there was this huge wave of trying to make things intuitive, trying to make things direct, gestures, touch, being able to have a one-to-one connection with what you're doing, touching the app or swiping the app rather than having two axes, whereas the mouse and the screen. And as you can imagine, the reason I'm talking about Amazon Alexa and the reason why I added an image there is because I think voice furthers that. Voice, if done correctly, I'm not saying we're there yet, but if done correctly, will really be a more natural way to interact because you don't really have to think about what to say. You just express yourself, and technology should adapt to you. That's the main underlying foundation. And even though this is an image that I kind of asked a designer to make when I joined the team, it does reflect where we're heading as a broader organization. So why is it so nice? Why is voice so intuitive? And what makes voice useful? Right? A lot of people are like, oh, voice is just nice to have, but what makes it useful? Well, let's consider these two scenarios. How many of you are Okada customers? A couple of you. Okada, for those of you who are not from the UK, is an online-only supermarket. And I compared the experiences of adding tuna to my cart, using the app, and using the Alexa skill. So I first have to open my phone. I have to go to my second screen where I have a folder called Food. Then I have to touch on that folder, wait for the app to load, which took 3 to 4 seconds, but I gave it a pass and didn't add it here. Then I have to touch that search bar and type in tuna. Then I have to scroll through the tuna options and just be bewildered by the prices that tuna has in the UK, and pick the one that I usually buy when it's on offer, and which is the Essential Waitrose 4-pack or 3-pack, and then add it to my trolley. That's about it. Roughly the whole experience, very well designed, took 50 to 60 seconds because that's what you need, the actual material time to do all of this. Maybe a minute, let's say a minute. Or I was at home and I just asked Alexa, ask Okada to add tuna to my trolley, and that's it. And the way that the Okada team built the skill is they just said, well, you usually buy Essential Waitrose tuna. Is that okay? Or I've added Essential Waitrose tuna to your trolley. Is that okay? Yes, done. And that usually took 5 to 6 seconds. So this is a very specific example, but the takeaway is voice is very specific. You can be very specific with what you say, and therefore, whereas in a traditional app, you would have to go into a hidden sub-menu, and then a different tab, and then click on Advanced Settings, and then toggle an option, you can just ask for it directly by speaking. So voice is very specific and allows you to express very complex things in a single sentence if you want. So what's changed recently? Again, I'm going to start going a little bit faster just so we can get to the practical part as well. We launched a lot of different devices. September 25th, we had a device event. We had a bunch of the usual stuff like a better Echo, which is the Echo Studio, has Dolby Atmos sound, new Echo Show, new Echo Dot, Echo for Kids, new Echo. And then we started getting a little bit more creative, and we started thinking, well, what other use cases could we think of for having an Echo device? And one of them, well, these two that I'm going to show you now, the Ring and the glasses, are day one edition devices, meaning they're not available for everyone. You can sign up for it, and if you get picked, you are one of the limited users, mainly just to try them out. And this Ring is a touch-to-speak ring. It has the smallest ever microphone and the smallest ever speaker in it. And you speak to Alexa by touching the Ring, and then you listen to Alexa speak by putting the Ring close to your ear. Again, just trying it out. And the point here is Alexa starts to be mobile, right? It's not no longer a physical speaker in your home, in the living room, in the bedroom, in the kitchen. It's now part of your, in a way, body, and you have access to Alexa wherever you are. Same thing with the glasses. It doesn't have any fancy UIs or visual interfaces. It's only a speaker that, lets you hear Alexa through bone conduction and a microphone, so no visuals at all. And then we have the Echo Buds, which are actually commercially available, maybe on pre-order for now, but they're already being sold. And these are in-ear headphones, a bit like the Jabra ones, a bit like the Bose. They're doing in-ear and over-ear headphones with Alexa built in. So the main takeaway is Alexa's everywhere. And then this is my favorite product that we launched, but that's a different story, the Amazon Smart Oven. So Alexa is also going to be changing her voice. Let's see if this plays.
Just like we practiced. Ready?
I'm always ready.
Showtime.
Today in Los Angeles, it's 85 degrees. Say my name. Woohoo! Oh, aren't we organized? I'm not reminding you of...
Not bad for a rookie.
Say rookie again. I dare you.
Now, the reason that's interesting is because if your voice design relies on the fact that Alexa's speaking, well, you may have to think again in the future, right? This is actually going to be using neural text-to-speech trained on Samuel L. Jackson's voice. So it's not just going to be pre-recorded pieces of text. It's actually going to be his voice generated for what Alexa needs to say. Hopefully Morgan Freeman is going to come in the future, I hope. But hopefully your favorite celebrity will too. Yeah, so this is the vision. I won't spend too much time on it, but Alexa everywhere, being able to speak to Alexa wherever you are, and that opens up a lot of design implications because if you have Alexa on the car or on the go, what sort of voice experience do you want to design for, rather than being in the living room in a very controlled environment. So we make a lot of devices, as you saw. We also allow others to make a lot of devices using the Alexa voice service. For example, we have over 200 third-party manufacturers building devices with different form factors. A lot of brands. The one I'm most interested in is the car, because the car is, for now, until self-driving becomes very mainstream, it's the perfect situation where to use voice. Your hands and eyes should be on the road, and that's it. You shouldn't be looking away, not even to touch a fancy touch screen, not even to touch physical buttons, because some of your senses are being used up by trying to find it. Whereas you can just express yourself as you're driving and be entertained and have your commute or drive be filled with experience without having to take your eyes off the road and hands off the wheel. So this is the one I'm most excited for. A lot of car manufacturers are adding Alexa to their cars built in. We also launched Echo Auto, which you can put on your car as like a added gadget. Again, a new use case for voice. So keep thinking of these things in the back of your mind. And then where it actually becomes relevant for us is the Alexa Skills Kit. So once you do have Alexa everywhere, what sort of experiences can you have access to? And these are, voice apps, so skills. You are teaching Alexa something new. So we have over, can anyone guess how many? If anyone was at the workshop, they know. We have over 100,000 skills. Most of them are concentrated in the US. So don't feel like that's a big number, so big that you shouldn't be building for voice. It is big enough to show you that there's a lot of developers building for voice, including a lot of big brands, which I put up on the screen. We also have visuals. It may seem counterintuitive. Why would you talk about voice this whole time and then also add visuals to your Alexa devices? Well, we're not saying that voice will replace everything else, right? Much like the screen has not replaced the command line when it comes to software development, or how we still use all of the new interfaces that we've created over the years. And voice hopefully will just be another layer where when it becomes more convenient or more quick or more natural to use voice with respect to something else will be used, whereas when you'd rather touch and swipe and skim with your eyes, you might as well do it the other way, right? There's a lot of things where voice is not meant for, like Microsoft Excel, for example. And these are visuals that you can add as a skill developer to enhance your voice experience. And it's used to be in beta, and now it's not. Now, when it comes to designing for voice, right, what should we start with? The first thing is understanding what to build. So let's take the Okada example just as a frame of reference. When you build something, it should be, and this probably applies to everything, but especially for voice, because with voice we have a very high bar. We have, the uncanny valley concept, which everyone loves to talk about. I think it very much applies to voice. Anything that sounds slightly less than human is going to frustrate people. And so it's very important to pick experiences where you minimize that risk. So the experience should be easier to do via voice than with the app or with the website or with whatever method you are currently using. It should be faster to do, and it should feel more natural. If it doesn't respect all of these three things, then I'm going to promise you no one's going to use it. And how do you make it easier, faster, more natural? Well, the first thing is you pick a good idea. For example, Okada thought, well, you're in the kitchen or now you're out and about and you think of things that you need to add to your shopping. Why not just ask Alexa in one sentence and it's done, rather than having to go through all the steps on your app or opening the website, logging in, and doing it all through the website. However, it's not just an idea that has to be good, it has to be the implementation as well. And if you implement things poorly, if Okada had implemented the skill poorly, no one would have used it anyways. Because if instead of saying, okay, I've added essential Waitrose to your cart, or trolley, Okada instead said, welcome to Okada. This is the UK's #1 online shopping supermarket. We have currently 3 things on offer. I heard you want to add tuna to your trolley. We have 6 different types of tuna. Type number 1. Blah, 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 blah. Type number 2, blah, 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 blah. Type number 3, blah, 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 blah. Type number 4, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then after 20 seconds of intro, then you have to choose, and it just doesn't feel fast, it doesn't feel natural, it doesn't feel convenient to use voice anymore with that, right? So it's about the idea, and it's also about the implementation. But the idea, and it doesn't have to be the code implementation, it has to be the experience, the actual UX. So you guys are the perfect crowd to, let's say, talk about this too. The UX with voice is the most important part. The implementation is actually very easy. Then once you have the idea, it comes time to condense it. So you have the idea, how do you actually put it into practice? With traditional apps, you would fire up Sketch, Adobe XD, or pen and paper. You would draw rectangles and start filling them in and have arrows point from one screen to the other and have flows. Because there's no other way to visualize the experience than by doing this. And if you're really slow, then you'll actually start coding it from scratch as you actually design it, which I'm sure everyone knows is not a very good idea. But with voice, you have a much bigger advantage, because with voice, what we're trying to replicate is not a series of app screens. What we're trying to replicate is a conversation. So we can just map out the script. What will the Alexa experience be like? What will the user say? Oh, Alexa, open Okada, or add tuna to trolley using Okada, or ask Okada to add tuna to my trolley, blah, 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 blah. What will Alexa say back? Who cares about what happens in the back end? What will Alexa say back? And does it sound natural? And will the user, continue using it? So no one needs to be able to code in order to prototype for voice. However, just having a conversation like this is not enough. I'm sure you can appreciate that there's a lot of edge cases, and we'll talk a little bit about later on how that differs from designing traditional apps. So start with the script. you can get creative. You can the best way to draft a script, especially the user's responses, is use different people. So use different people, have this conversation, pretend to be Alexa and have this conversation with other people. We actually hosted an event in London with the Mobile UX London crowd, and they came to our office in Amazon Shoreditch office, and they hacked away all day on designing for voice, and then they presented. And yeah, it was interesting because no one was worrying about code. They were just worrying about what will the conversation be like, what will the users feel, what are the user stories, and yeah, at the end of the day, anyone could do it. So now we come into how do you actually practically go from that script to actually designing something? What's the equivalent of using Sketch or Adobe XD for voice? And the way that we first have to tackle it is understand the difference with designing for voice. I mentioned earlier that there's a little difference than designing with apps. Well, first of all, this can summarize a voice experience. Flow diagrams are great. And when you build an app, you have the luxury of being able to control that flow. Because if you have 2 buttons on the screen, but 3 functionalities, users will only be able to do those two things that those 2 buttons lead to. That's it. They won't even know that there's a 3rd functionality. With voice, when Alexa asks a question to a user, the user could answer it, or they could just say whatever the hell they want. And then you have to handle it, right? So if you design a voice experience like a flow diagram, assuming that people will follow your instructions, assuming people will answer your questions, you're going to have a bad time. And to do a flow diagram effectively, you would actually need to have arrows that point in every other flow as well. Basically, there's infinite loopbacks. Because voice is not hierarchical, especially when it comes to the user's perception. So for the sake of the skill, or for the sake of the implementation, or for the sake of whatever it could be, but for a user, when you're speaking to someone, you can go down a rabbit hole, but then you can immediately skip and talk about something else, right? It's like top level. Imagine if all of your apps or websites' functionality was summarized in 1 page, like a mosaic of buttons. That's voice, because people will be able to say and metaphorically press each of those buttons with 1 sentence from anywhere in your skill. So when you think of everything like a top-level UI, things start to get a little bit more clear. And let's listen to some examples of why it's risky to design voice experiences with not taking that into consideration. So this is an example of a ticket ordering skill. These are real skills, but I won't tell you what those skills are. And in this case, the developers decided to, and I imagine the designers, decided to separate the skill into 2 main phases. There's the searching phase, or the searching section, and the near me section, where the near me can give you information about what's near you, and then you can search for titles using the appropriate section. And let's listen to an experience.
Find a movie near me.
You can browse movies that are coming soon, or I can give a recommendation. What would you like to do?
Find A Wrinkle in Time.
You are in the Browse Movie section. Say stop to return to main menu.
Right? The user inadvertently triggered a different section of the skill. Now, granted, it could be the skill that's implemented poorly, but poor design leads to poor implementations as well. And you can see where it went wrong. So you can ask for things near you, but actually by asking to find a specific title, the user was using the search functionality, and that hit a roadblock. The other example is even more frustrating. The second example is when you know what you want, but it's a step further down the hierarchical diagram. So you know that you want to change the location, but you first have to ask to change something.
You can place this order or change something. Which would you like?
Change the location.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite understand. You can place this order or change something. Which would you like?
Change something.
You can hear the frustration.
Okay, you can change the pickup time, change the location, change the pickup method, or change the order item. What would you like to do?
Change the location.
Right? That's the unnecessarily frictionful. No need to do that. It was also poorly designed, but again, good design helps good implementations. Okay, so what do we want to do about that? What's the alternative to using flow diagrams? I'm not saying flow diagrams are bad, again, but designing a voice experience with flow diagrams can be risky. What we thought of, and again, this is just what we're experimenting with, it's still a pretty new concept, and we'd love for people to try it out and give us feedback on it, is situational design. And by situational design, the assumption is, the theory is, that every interaction is its own mini experience. Anything the user says is an experience in and of itself, and therefore it should be designed like that. And what makes up a situational design turn? Well, everything starts from the utterance, what the user says. Then there's a situation which, let's say, makes that utterance unique with respect to other same utterances with different situations, right? For example, new user, return user. What Alexa should say back, which is the response, and then what Alexa needs from the user as the prompt. So very, very sequential. A mini flow, if you will, from utterance to prompt, but at least that can be controlled, not everything else. Here's another thing here where we internally are using Adobe XD for this. You can use whatever you want, even pen and paper, even Excel, I don't know. Just use whatever you want, but the good thing about Adobe XD is that it has built-in voice prototyping functionality, so you can tie one card to the next based on what the user says. And we're also developing some plugins for Adobe XD to generate these cards based on other states. So you can combine states and some states automatically and generate all of these cards based on the different situations. So you have the utterance, the situation, the response, and the prompt, right? And then how do you go about designing an experience with this atomic structure of a card? Well, in the end, you will create flows, but they are a consequence, not the foundation, the incipit, not the starting point, right? They're the consequence. So you lay out these cards as you draft the conversation. As the conversation progresses, these situational cards are drawn out like a deck of playing cards, and they will create ultimately a flow, but a flow that was generated by what the user said and what Alexa said back by picking the right card at the right time. Considering we also have visuals, you can add visuals to the side. And the way that you organize these cards is up to you. Some of us are trying to use matrices. So for example, you have the macro sections of the skill on vertical columns, and then maybe different situations or different variations of the same situation as rows or vice versa. We also liked experimenting with the concept of scenarios or storyboards. So, you have scenarios, various things that users will typically want to do, like a typical user journey, and you map out the cards that would typically play. But when you try it out with real users and you see people are asking for different things, you either need to fill in with different cards and therefore create them, or if you have them, you add them in as that conversation progresses. So basically, it's having a card for most common prompts and utterances, and as well, if you don't want to get too specific, you can always have a fallback card that helps users get right back into the right path. And the reason why it's different than flow diagrams is because with flow diagrams, you kind of do the same thing, but as I said earlier, you would need to be able to loop back in the flow diagram to every other possible direction and flow from any box, essentially. Whereas this avoids all the arrows, and the flow itself is just a consequence of how the cards were laid out based on that interaction. So a couple examples, I'll flick through these very quickly. This is a cakewalk skill that remembers your birthday. So you would first write the script. You would identify what each turn is. Each turn is a card. So you would create a first turn where the user opens the cakewalk skill, and then you would create another turn where the user tells Alexa their birthday. And sometimes the user may not give the full birthday, or sometimes they may. And you create 2 different cards for that, or 3 different cards for that, up to you. Another one is Nomad's Mission. This is using another tool as well. This I just took from a colleague who was playing around with situational design. And the way she's organizing it is you have the various macro states, right, as the columns, and then the variations for each one. And we'll see in the voice design best practices why that's important. And things can get pretty big. And again, as I said, we're creating a tool that helps generate these cards automatically so that you don't need to work on them individually. And maybe there's a point where it makes sense to cluster them into different modules or to different sections. But yeah, that's up to you to find the best way that you like to work with a lot of different screens. I'm sure voice is not the only thing that has a lot of different screens, and projects get big. I can imagine that with apps, they get humongous. So I'm sure you know how to manage this a lot better than me. I'm usually on the tech side. Okay, so let's just whiz through some voice design best practices if you were to start applying situational design and start implementing some voice experiences. Well, the first thing, foundation to always keep in mind is that our eyes expect uniformity, but our ears expect variety. And what I mean by that is, first of all, the way that we hear things is very different than the way that we see things, and that'll have implications later on in the other best practices. But people hate hearing the same thing twice. People hate hearing the same thing twice. People hate hearing the same thing twice. So don't say the same thing twice in your scale. Have variation. Make sure that it has that human touch of, even if you're expressing the same concept, change up the words, change up even just the simple confirmation prompts. Also, very different to apps, users will have varying amounts of detail in their skill responses. So some people may say London, some people may say London tonight at 6 p.m., and that allows you to skip all the follow-up questions. Not like an online form or a sign-up form on an app where you have to fill in everything before you can press submit or register. It can be a lot more natural. And Alexa provides the functionality to make it natural on the implementation side, but it has to be taken advantage of. Then the one breath test. Keep things short. Keep things to one breath, right? Users only like to say one thing. When we speak normally, we tend to use sentences that make up a single breath. And that's also a good rule for how much people can absorb in terms of information. So something like, so your final order is 1 large pizza, correct? Versus something much longer like, so I will now recap what you ordered. You ordered 1 large pizza. Please say yes if you want to change, and it makes a lot more effect if you're not seeing it. Because if you're not seeing it, you have to remember all this information. What was the milkshake? How much did it cost? What was the Facebook page? What was my order, right? So don't just feed in whatever your API or whatever your visual service sends back to you. Adapt your strings to be concise and crisp for the voice experience. Keep choices maximum to 3, and keep your prompts unambiguous. What do I mean by unambiguous? Would you like some cheese or pepperoni pizza? Yes, I'd like some. I'd love some pizza. Whereas you're asking, we have cheese or pepperoni pizza. Which one would you like? It's fine to say both, but not yes, right? Also, put your questions at the end, much like in a talk. Keep your questions till the end. So if I say something like, where would you like to go? If you're stuck, just ask for help, right? People tend to answer the question as soon as you ask it. And if there's a minimum delay between when you finish asking the question and then you add on something, people will think Alexa's waiting for an answer, and they will give the answer, especially kids. So make sure that you put the questions at the end. Then also, don't be like a telephone IVR system. Don't design your voice experience like this. If you'd like to play a game, say game. Or if you'd like to hear a story, say story. It just sounds wrong, it sounds condescending. I actually took this example from the BBC GEL, Global Experience Learning, I think, Global Experience Language. Anyone from the BBC GEL team here? No? And they created a great post on designing for voice, especially their CBeebies skill, which is a BBC skill for kids. And they have stories for kids, and it's very well designed. They do talks frequently on how they actually designed it, all of the learnings from it. Hopefully they'll come to UX Live one day. And A much better alternative is, would you like a game or a story? People will say game or story anyways, but at least you're not making it robotic, right? And the difference is that the first one is 19 words and feels super rigid and condescending, whereas would you like to play a game or a story? It's like 8 words, and it's what a normal person would tell you. So there's other voice design best practices. If you want to learn more about them, we have a living document where we keep adding to them. And as I said, mentioned with the BBC story, there's tons of people working in the voice space publishing interesting findings. So, I'm sure if you look around, you'll find some great guides, but this is our own, and we like to update it with especially multimodal stuff, with APL, with the visuals, and yeah, keep checking up for that. And the parting words are start with people, not computers. I'm going to use the BBC one last time. A couple years ago, they created a series of blog posts on prototyping for voice. This is not their gel team. This is the research and development team, so when it was still being scoped out. And the way that they designed their first voice experiences was using the Wizard of Oz method, where you have one person speaking to an unplugged device, and you have a divider, because people communicate a lot with their face, with their hands, as you've been seeing me do. And on the right, you have the brains of the operation, pretending to be the skill and having all of the post-it notes. And it seems like they're using a precursor of situational design as well, where each post-it is a little response or card. So yeah, design, start with people, not with computers. But I'm sure you all know this because it's a UX Live conference and not a developer conference. So it's selling ice to Eskimos. Okay, thank you.